Can I get a confirmation? Okay, you're seeing me in my screen or just me?
Looking good, Jocelyn. And I think Peter's going to be sharing his screen in just a moment.
Great. Thanks, Lonnie.
Is now a good time to share?
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Okay.
All right, our count is up to 259 participants. Thank you all for being here this evening. Welcome to the first ever public meeting, which will be jointly co-hosted tonight by the City of Austin Parks and Rec Department and the Austin Transit Partnership. My name is Jocelyn Boakes, and in addition to being a rower myself, I serve as a public involvement manager for the Blue Line. I guess we'll go over well, okay, let's just stay on this slide for now. What I value most about working for the Austin Transit Partnership is that we are not only in partnership with the City of Austin and Capital Metro, but also with the greater Austin community. And together we are tasked with the goal of building a citywide transportation system from the ground up and decreasing our city's carbon footprint. One of my favorite quotes is from French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, which says, "Only the guy who isn't rowing has time to rock the boat." So thank you for taking the time to row with us tonight. Thank you for being a part of our crew. Some of us will row port and others will row starboard. And it's the healthy back and forth that will keep us moving forward together. So with that, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our esteemed council member, Kathy Tovo, who has joined us tonight and would like to say a few words. Council member?
Thanks very much. Hopefully you can hear and see me. Is that correct?
Yes, we can, yes.
I'm sorry, I have no rowing analogies to offer, but I just want to really say thank you. You know, as I regard tonight's meeting, I'm really just grateful for the way in which Project Connect is proceeding in our community, because tonight is a great example of the way in which all of us are going to help shape that transformative mobility project. You know, there's no doubt that Project Connect is going to really change our city in wonderful ways and provide transportation options that just don't exist now. And I know so many of you on this meeting, you know, already understand all of the benefits, and so I won't dwell there. But one of the things that I'm really excited about is the way in which the Austin Transit Partnership and Cap Metro and the City of Austin are approaching this conversation. You know, we want to do so, and we want to make sure that this these transportation options will roll out in a way that also allows our existing residents to stay in place, that allows our existing businesses to stay in place, and really respects some of the wonderful community resources that are along the line. And when there are potential conflicts or areas of concern, you know, I'm very appreciative that we can stop and have conversations about how best to address those. And, you know, we make the best decisions, I think, at City Hall when we have the community engaged and involved. And at one of our meetings with Cap Metro and with the Austin Transit Partnership, the City Council had an opportunity to hear from members of the Austin Rowing Club who came and, you know, really articulated the need for more planning around this particular issue. The Blue Line, as we'll hear soon, is in the immediate area of the Waller Creek Boathouse, and the Austin Rowing Club operates its terrific programs out of that location. And so my thanks first start with the Austin Rowing Club members who came to our meeting and really highlighted this issue, and for all of us who were contemplating that joint partnership agreement. And then next, you know, I really want to thank all of the staff involved, including our Austin Park staff, for putting together this community meeting. I think it's a very important opportunity for those of us who are policymakers to hear feedback from the community. And it's also a great way for your ideas to help shape that design and the eventual solutions here. And so thank you. And then my last thank you goes to all of you who have signed on. I'm told we have more than 250 attendees here tonight. Probably more will join. So thank you for taking time out of your evening. I know there are lots of ways to spend your evening. Thank you for taking time to participate in this important conversation, to provide your questions and your feedback, and to help shape this project for the better. You know, this is key to how we do business in Austin. Really working with the community to make sure that they're involved, engaged, and help shaping these decisions. So thank you again.
Thank you, Council Member. So if we could go to the next slide, please, on the agenda.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up. I just want to make sure I've got the right one.
In the meantime, I saw a Q&A come through asking which club I rode for, most recently for ARC, and I look forward to hitting the water again in July. After having a baby, my doctor said I needed to stay off the water for a year, so July will be a year. Okay, so we've got the agenda back up. So we're going to kick things off with more introductions, and that will be upcoming. And then we'll do a brief overview of Project Connect and the Blue Line presented by the Austin Transit Partnership. Then we'll move on to the Waller Creek Boathouse and alternative site selection, which is going to be, or a site analysis, excuse me, which is going to be presented by PARD. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps before moving into breakout discussions. One thing, as we move into breakout discussions, we are going to be jumping, whether you're watching us on social media or in the Zoom webinar, we're going to be jumping from the webinar format into a breakout Zoom meeting. So be prepared to make the jump with us in a link. Next slide, please. So now we'll go ahead and go through the introductions, and I'd like to introduce first and foremost our esteemed Director of Parks and Recreation here in Austin, Kimberly McNeely.
Good evening. Thank you to everyone who has dedicated or is about to dedicate some time to this conversation. My name is Kimberly McNeely, and I serve as the Parks and Recreation Director. Pleased to be here tonight.
Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Assistant Director Liana Kalivoka.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liana Kalivoka, and I serve as the Assistant Director for the Parks and Recreation Department, overseeing planning, development, operations, and maintenance. And thanks from me as well for being here. We look forward to getting your feedback, your ideas, and make sure that we move together forward in this process.
Thank you, Liana. And last but not least, we have our Chief of Architecture and Urban Design, and also the rock star behind sharing our screen tonight is Peter Mullen.
Yeah, thanks, Jocelyn. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate your time, and apologize for my technological fibs. So hopefully that will be the end of them.
Thanks, Peter. You're doing a great job. And yeah, the next slide is I get to let you take it from here.
Okay, great. Just we're going to start just to orient folks to Project Connect and to the Blue Line. This is really the context for the discussion tonight. That's focused on the boathouse, but obviously important context. You know, Project Connect is, I think Councilmember Tovo really eloquently said, is this new robust system that's being planned for our city and really preparing it for its future. And I think every day we recognize that the need for this is only increasing, and that we desperately need to expand and increase our transit, both to benefit our planet, but also just to benefit our daily use of and daily movements around the city. You know, it's important to recognize that it is a system, right? It's composed of multiple components. Tonight we're going to focus on one aspect of one project within the program, but we always have to see each of these pieces as part of a greater whole. So light rail works with local bus, which works with Metro Rapid, and works with commuter rail and local pickup service and all the different components of the system that we will be building and building on through this program. One of the important contexts for this is the downtown tunnel, the subway, that the portion of the light rail system downtown is running underground, and we'll see where that begins right at the boathouse. So that's sort of kind of a critical node in the system as well. But it's a crucial part to making the whole system work quickly and to serve as many people as possible. So getting in a little bit more granular, this is the blue line, which is one of the two light rail lines that's being proposed. The other one is the orange line, which you can see, which runs north-south. The blue line runs basically from the airport down the East Riverside corridor through East Austin, Southeast Austin, and then into sort of the South Central waterfront area. And at the waterfront station, which is in the South Central waterfront area, it takes a right turn. And this whole section of the blue line is at grade. It's running on the surface. There's a little bit at the airport that's running elevated, but most of it is running on the ground in the center of Riverside Drive. When it gets to the South Central waterfront, it takes a right turn. There's a one stop, I'll show you in a second, and then it goes into a bridge over the lake. And then when it gets to the other side of the lake, goes down into the tunnel, as I said earlier. And then it joins at Republic Square, it joins with the orange line, and then together, the blue and the orange essentially run north together up Guadalupe and then eventually North Lamar. So that's the context of the blue line, of which tonight's discussion is really a part. This is a little bit more zoomed in, and you can see how, again, the blue line coming from the east down Riverside takes a right turn at the South Central waterfront. Again, there's a at-grade station, surface station called Waterfront Station for now. All station names are subject to change, of course, as we move this process forward. And then as it approaches the water, it actually rises up and rises over the lake. And then when it gets to the north side of the lake, there's what we call a portal. And this is where the train will dive down into the underground system. And so basically north of the portal and going north, it's all underground as part of the subway. There is the Rainy Mac station basically at Cesar Chavez, and there are a couple of entrances planned south of Cesar Chavez to provide easy access to the rail network there. And then it continues north up Trinity Street, past the Convention Center, and then at 4th Street takes a left turn and goes towards Republic Square. So this rail portal is a really key node in the whole alignment of the blue line. And you can see in the next slide, that portal is located almost exactly at the location of the Waller Creek Boathouse. So that is really the basis for this conversation tonight, because there is a conflict there between this really critical moment where the train goes into the underground system at the boathouse and the boathouse itself. There are a lot of other elements in the vicinity as well that we are trying to weave through and make sure that we're supporting and maintaining. In addition to the boathouse, there is the kind of the trailhead, the beginning of Waterloo Greenway Trail, which runs along Waller Creek up to the north, which really is right at that same location. There's also the outlet to the Waller Creek Flood Control Tunnel, which has a lot of critical ongoing operational requirements. That whole infrastructure basically removes the eastern side of downtown out of the floodplain and there are operational requirements on an ongoing basis with that. And then as well, the Butler Trail, the hike and bike trail on both sides of the lake, which is obviously such an important part of our community and so well loved and well used. So this is a very complicated area where a lot of different infrastructure elements of our city are coming together, and of which the Waller Creek Boathouse is one of them. So in terms of where we are in terms of the design process and the planning process, we are currently going through the preliminary engineering and environmental review process for the blue and orange lines. And so last summer, we released the 15% design. We are in the process of preparing the 30% design, as well as the draft environmental impact statement. So as part of the preliminary engineering process, we have to document, identify, and document all of the environmental impacts of the program. And those include, physical impacts, historic resources, environmental impacts, et cetera. So we're in the process of preparing that draft environmental impact statement. And so obviously the impact of the boathouse is one of those impacts that we are analyzing and documenting as part of this process. So the reason I point this out is that this discussion tonight is not going to be the last discussion we have, right? This is part of a process that will extend, through the rest of the year in terms of analyzing impacts, documenting those impacts, et cetera. And then, the idea is that we get through the environmental process by the end of the year. And that concludes with the final environmental impact statement and the FTA record of decision. Now, it's another important point to make is that this process is a federally regulated process. We are partners with the Federal Transit Administration in the development and implementation of these light rail lines. The FTA will be a significant funder of these programs. And so everything we do has to fit into that federal process that is, sort of established and set up for us. So how does that relate specifically to impacts on the boathouse? So this is just a little bit of a more specific flow chart to show the next how we're proceeding with that. So the first thing we have to just identify the impacts in association with the blue line. And so we've identified clearly that there is a potential impact with the boathouse just because of the intersection of the blue line with the current boathouse location. And those impacts are identified and analyzed in conjunction with our partners at PARD and as well as at Texas Park and Wildlife Department. Now, there's the boathouse itself, there's the surrounding and underlying park land itself, and there are issues related to both of those elements that we have to understand, analyze, and document. So as we move forward, we will continue to assess what the impacts are, as well as what the mitigation will be to address those impacts. We can't just have the impacts and do nothing. We have to mitigate them. And so that's an ongoing process and that we're working on now. And tonight's discussion is part of that. We're going to impact the boathouse. We have to mitigate those impacts. As part of that mitigation for the boathouse, PARD has started to analyze potential alternative locations, alternative sites for boathouse facilities, if indeed it turns out that the boathouse will be impacted by this process. So tonight's event is really about gathering feedback and input from you all towards that analysis of alternative sites. So it's a really important part of the process, and it'll all be documented. All this analysis and all this feedback gets then incorporated into the draft environmental impact statement. So all of your comments will be recorded and documented, included in that. And that draft environmental impact statement is once that all is collected, gets released to the public, and there's public review of that as well in kind of a summary. And that is scheduled to happen later in this summer of this year. following that process, those and the comments that are received from that, the DEIS, those all get folded into the final EIS, as well as any mitigation for the impacts that have been identified. And that gets wrapped up in what's called the record of decision from the FTA. And that's the FTA is basically concurrence that we have correctly identified both the impacts and the mitigation measures. So all of which to say is that's a really, regulated process that we're in the middle of, and this is an important part of that. And then once that's complete, then we can start to really move forward with alternative sites. We have some time to analyze sites. This is an important part of that process, and we really look forward to your feedback. Okay, I'm going to now pass it to Director McNeely to talk about the boathouse itself and take it from here.
Good evening. So the thing that I would hope to be able to share with you tonight is a very high level and historical summary and description of the boathouse as is. For those of you who are avid rowers or have used this particular concessionaire and concession space or enjoyed the boathouse in some way, you might know that there are details that are not part of this conversation in this description, but that's not to say that they're not important. I'm only just providing something that's high level for the basis of getting our community engagement started. So as you may know, this is located at 74 Trinity Street. There was an agreement executed in 2012 for the operation of the boathouse. That has been in place since the operations of this boathouse has been in place since 2012. And while there was a slow start, those of you who have enjoyed it recently will know that it's a very vibrant operation at this particular point in time. This particular building is owned by the City of Austin. Specifically, it's a Parks and Recreation Department building. The current concessionaire is the Austin Rowing Club, and so the Parks and Recreation Department has enjoyed a relationship with the Austin Rowing Club since the execution of the agreement. And also just a very brief description, it's 2 floors, and it's the home of the Austin Rowing Club. It's also the home of Alta's Cafe. You may have enjoyed a beverage or a snack while enjoying a view of the lake at Alta's. There's also a subcontractor or somebody who works very closely with Austin Rowing Club that's called Retro Boats. And you've also may have been able to enjoy the programs and services provided by Row Fitness. Next slide, please. So the reason why we're here today and what's really important to us is for us to be able to gather input from all of you about the boathouse, about the operations of the boathouse, and to specifically share with you information about the sites that have been analyzed. I want to come out and say that we've used the words interchangeably, feasibility and site analysis, but for those of you who have been involved in very structured and long-term feasibility studies, I want to be sure to clarify that the information Liana will be sharing with you in the next slides is actually a site analysis, and we're gathering additional information about the site tonight, and we're gathering different feedback from you, or gathering additional feedback from you based upon the analysis, the preliminary analysis that we have conducted. I also want you to know that what is guiding some of our conversation is also something called the Joint Powers Agreement. And the Joint Powers Agreement is between the City of Austin, Cap Metro, and the Austin Transit Partners, and it outlines how we're going to engage with each other to make sure that we deliver a project that meets the community needs and certainly takes into consideration community feedback. And so please know that as part of the Joint Powers Agreement, there were some very specific information that the City Council has provided to guide our relationship. And that included information specific to the Waller Creek Boathouse. And so we're here today to really evaluate and assess the suitable and appropriate spaces for the possible relocation of the Waller Creek Boathouse. And that's part of what today's conversation is about. Also, you can know that we are committed as a team to take a look at analyzing elements of the existing boathouse and where they might be, how the existing boathouse, how those elements might be moved, reconstructed, or reused. And so we're still in progress, and some of the information that you may provide to us tonight will help us as we continue that analysis. Please know that starting today, we are participating in community engagement efforts so that we can understand the impacts to stakeholders and the interests of the community as it relates to the different site analysis that we're going to share, and whether those sites, if you have any specific feedback about those sites that will help give us more information about selecting a location for the future. And lastly, still in progress is our collaboration with this entire team to really make a final recommendation about the relocation of the rowing operations, and to make sure that in any of the decisions that we make, that those operations are minimally disrupted. And so what I'd like to do is hand the rest of this conversation or this presentation over to my esteemed colleague, Liana Calivoca, who will be able to help you walk you through the site analysis and some of the pros and cons to each of those locations. Thank you, Liana.
Thanks, Kimberly. So here we are today starting this discussion in order to be able to get your thoughts and feedback. So as a first step in this evaluation of alternative sites, our planning team performed a preliminary analysis of parkland that is along Lady Bird Lake. The goal was to identify appropriate locations for a boathouse facility. So our planners started by identifying 6 sites that I will discuss next, and these were evaluated using a set of criteria that are listed on this site, and they include adequate land space. Obviously, we want the site to be able to accommodate, to have space to be able to accommodate a building that is of a certain square footage. At this time, we're thinking at least 7,000 square feet. We also want to have appropriate shoreline. And that means to have enough space along the waterfront to be able to have docks and accommodate traffic in and out of the site. Distribution of water traffic. As you may have experienced, the lake gets congested from time to time, so we want for the site to ideally offer water access to parts of the lake where access is limited today, so that we increase diversity and inclusion for these amenities while we reduce the congestion at Lady Bird Lake. We also want to be mindful of potential conflicts with existing water concessions at the lake. The next one is access to utilities. For development purposes, it would be easier to develop a site that has existing access to most utilities, and those primarily of interest would be electricity, water, and wastewater. Minimal site impact. We would like to minimize clearing of existing vegetation or any trees, and also minimize the impact from slope adjustments that we would need to make to mitigate erosion, and allow for access that will be ADA compliant. In addition, the site should not require landfill remediation, and you will understand more about this in a minute. And the last criterion is of development. So the site should have no major conflicts with adopted vision plans, with any active projects, and will present options for decreased development timeline, which will include planning, permitting, and construction of the improvements. And that's important so that we will ensure the continuity of operations with as less of a disruption as possible. So the next slide gives you an overview of the 6 sites that we included in this first analysis. And we'll walk through these 6 sites together and discuss some of the characteristics that we considered in this process. So starting with the first site in the next slide, if we can, yes. The first site is located in Zucker Park, and it is west of the Mopac Bridge and next to an existing rowing concession. This site is a former landfill, which means that remediation of the landfill would be required to accommodate a new building structure. Parking and docks, we think, could be accommodated. However, selection of this site may be complicated because I hope most of you are aware that the Zucker vision plan is in process. So this will take a little bit more time to be finalized. And in addition, in this area, the Mopac South project by CDRMA is in progress as well. So this could offer complication. The second site is also in Zucker Park, and this is just east of the Mopac Bridge and across from the Texas Rowing Center, which is on the north side of the lake. Similar to the first site, it's also a former landfill and with the same remediation requirements. And again, it's within the Zucker Park, and the vision planning process is unfolding, and the CDRMA project on Mopac South is also offering some complications. So these are things that we would like to be mindful of and consider as we move forward. For site 3, it is on the north side of Lady Bird Lake, and it is a ball field on city parkland that is currently used by Austin High School through an agreement that the city has with AISD. Relocation of a boathouse to this site would require that the department identifies a replacement site for the ball field. In addition, the site is adjacent to the Texas Rowing Center and right next to a popular boat launch that is used extensively by the public. And the location is congested with many users from Austin High, the Butler Trail, and that has, as a result, limited parking availability. Site 4 is further east and close to the location of the current boathouse. The considerations for this site include the upcoming project by the Trail Foundation, which that project is in permitting right now and is expected to bring improvements and amenities for children and families that are lacking in the Rainy Street and the downtown area. Construction for the Trail Foundation project is, which is in partnership with the Parks and Recreation Department, is expected to start later this year. In addition, from our evaluation, that site also has traffic circulation and elevation challenges, topographical challenges, and there are several planned and active construction projects that will create additional congestion for the foreseeable future. Site 5 is located within the former Holly Power Plant and within the Holly Shores Edward Rendon Senior Park at Festival Beach. This park has a vision plan that was adopted by City Council a few years ago. And that vision plan for the park does not identify a boathouse facility in this location. That means that such a change on the vision plan would require community engagement and an amendment that will have to go through boards, commissions, and eventual council action. This process may complicate the timeline for the project, so that's why it is one of the considerations that we want to bring up. We also had done a recent assessment of the warehouse buildings on this site, and we discovered that water and wastewater utilities are also lacking along this area of the waterfront. And we come to the last site, which is located also east of I-35 and on the south side of Lady Bird Lake. This site includes an existing building, which housed a hostel that permanently closed just a few years ago. So the building is vacant right now. It could be extensively renovated to accommodate a 7,000 square feet facility. It also has an existing canoe rental concession that could be expanded with the new facility. There is a small parking lot and nearby on-street parking along South Lakeshore Boulevard. Considering that water concessions are currently concentrated west of I-35, a boathouse at this site will distribute water recreation opportunities more evenly across parkland on Lady Bird Lake. And with this, we come to our metrics, which is on our next slide, which has our preliminary analysis for these 6 sites that were identified. And at this time, the leading alternative site for a boathouse facility is site 6, which is the site for where the former hostel was located. And the next slide provides a little bit more context for that leading alternative site. For those of you who may not be familiar with the site, you may see the building that's already located there. There is access to the water. There is the existing rowing dock next to the water, and a small parking area along off of the South Lakeshore Boulevard. So that concludes this very preliminary considerations for the alternative for these sites that we evaluated, and I will return it to Jocelyn.
Thank you very much, Liana, and Director McNeely and Peter for your wonderful explanations. So we do, and thank you to everyone who's also been participating in our Q&A in the Zoom webinar, as well as any questions that have been submitted via social media. So the next steps that we're going to, it is all of the feedback that we've received so far by way of the Q&A, both here and in the social media, is going to be used to inform the agency coordination and evaluating opportunities for the new boathouse facilities. And then ATP and the City of Austin collaboration with the Federal Transit Administration and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department will quantify project impacts to the boathouse and underlying parkland and identify the required mitigation. Then we'll have a public review of the draft environmental impact statement, and that will describe the impacts that are planned and that's planned for summer of 2022. And then, of course, we'll have an ongoing analysis in collaboration with the FTA to comply with federal environmental requirements. So if that wasn't a mouthful, we are at our favorite point where we're going to have feedback and discussion. And so if we could have one more slide, please. So now we're going to move into our breakout rooms. And if you click, Lorenzo has already put the link in our chat, and it should be loaded into our social media as well. So what you're going to find is that in each of the rooms that we have assigned breakout rooms, we're going to have a discussion of the same 5 questions. The participants or the people who are going to be hosting are going to include a facilitator, and you will have a chance to meet with a Parks and Rec representative as well as an ATP representative. In the event that you feel that you need to leave the room, be sure that when you click leave, you click leave the room and not leave the meeting. That said, we will leave our meeting rooms open until 7 p.m. will be the absolute cap. But if you feel like you've gone through all 5 questions and you feel like you've closed out by any earlier than that, then we will not reconvene here. We will close the meeting from our breakout rooms. And so with that, if everyone could please start clicking on the link that is available in our chat, and you will be assigned to our breakout rooms.